Hey everyone! If you enjoyed this video, the full version is available on Patreon. I'll be uploading all my content there going forward.
Chapter 1. Lin Yu sighed softly and pushed open the creaking wooden door of the observatory. A musty smell wafted over me. It smells of dust, old paper, and cold metal mixed together, as if time has been frozen into a physical form. This is Earth in a parallel world in the near future, and it is also the last space left by his late grandfather. As an astronomy enthusiast, Lin Yu often comes here. On one hand, it's about remembering the deceased, on the other hand, it's about sorting through those relics that outsiders would consider no different from scrap metal. He reached out and made a grasping motion in the air, his fingertips tracing the dust motes dancing in the moonlight. The cool touch pulled his thoughts from the bustling city back to this tranquil moment. It's always these. He walked over to a huge floor-standing telescope. The cool metal tube was covered in dust, and he gently wiped it with his sleeve, as if he were caressing a rare treasure. My gaze swept across the room and finally settled on an inconspicuous box in the corner. It was a wooden box forgotten in the shadows, out of place among the sophisticated instruments around it. Lin Yu walked over and squatted down. The box was locked. But the padlock had long been eroded by time, its surface covered with a layer of dark red rust, which crumbled at the slightest touch. He didn't exert much effort, he just used his fingers to pry it open slightly. Click! With a crisp snap, the latch broke. When the lid was opened, none of the expected star charts, manuscripts, or precious observation notes appeared. There was only one item inside. A brass instrument covered in thick dust and with an extremely strange shape. It was about the size of an old-fashioned computer tower, lying quietly in the center of the box. It was made entirely of brass, and its surface was not smooth, but covered with intricate patterns that were so complex they made one's scalp crawl. These patterns intertwined and coiled, not belonging to any known geometric or artistic style, and if you stared at them for a moment, you would have the illusion that they were slowly wriggling. In the very center of the instrument is a dark-colored nameplate. Lin Yu blew away the dust, revealing 4 ancient seal characters. The strokes were vigorous, and each character exuded an indescribable sense of weight and depth. Projection of all worlds. He uttered those 4 words softly, then burst out laughing. In an era where holographic technology has become so widespread that it can project realistic S on the street at any time, this name sounds more like a cheap gimmick for some retro media player. It's probably an old antique toy that Grandpa found at some flea market. He shook his head, but his curiosity was piqued. He took the instrument out of the case. It was extremely heavy, far exceeding the weight of any other metal of the same volume. He examined it carefully, trying to find a way to start it. On the side of the instrument, he found several interfaces. To his surprise, this ancient instrument, which looked older than him, actually had a universal data import port. It still works. Lin Yu's interest was completely ignited. He took out his portable computer from his backpack. It was a slim, futuristic device, which, placed next to the brass instrument in front of him, presented a jarring sense of temporal dissonance. On his computer, there was still a video he had stayed up all night editing. It was a compilation he created out of personal interest, seamlessly editing together the most exciting and thrilling battles from an anime called Demon Slayer. He even added rousing background music, considering it a masterpiece. Let's use you to give it a try. He connected one end of the data cable to the computer and tentatively plugged the other end into the port of the brass instrument. Click! With a soft click, the data cable was perfectly connected, and it seemed to be locked in place by some mechanism, exceptionally secure. Lin Yu located the video file, clicked import, and randomly entered test file in the pop-up naming box. Confirm. Buzz. A low, soft sound came from inside the brass instrument. It didn't sound like electricity, but rather like countless tiny gears starting to turn seamlessly. The intricate patterns on the instrument's surface seemed to come alive, with streaks of light flowing between the lines and eventually converging on a lens-like crystal structure at the top. The next second, an incredibly condensed, faint beam of light shot out from the lens. Without any divergence, it pierced straight through the dusty air, precisely entered the skylight of the observatory's dome, and finally disappeared into the deep night sky. Then, everything returned to calm. That's it. Lin Yu pursed his lips, leaned over and tapped the brass casing. The effect is quite exaggerated, the light pollution is serious, Grandpa. He stopped taking it seriously, assuming it was some old-fashioned projection toy with exaggerated effects and huge power consumption, perhaps projecting images onto the clouds or something like that. He turned around, preparing to pack his things and leave. However, Lin Yu was unaware of this. At the very moment that beam of light disappeared into the night sky, in countless worlds and vast, distinct timelines, incomprehensible anomalies occurred simultaneously. The hidden leaf village on the Ninja World continent. The sun shone brightly, and the statues of the Hokage of past generations atop the Hokage rock stood solemn and dignified. However, directly in front of the Hokage rock, above the most expansive expanse of sky, space itself began to distort and tear apart without warning. A massive light curtain, indescribable in its size, unfolded out of thin air. It was silent, yet carried an absolute, unyielding will that instantly enveloped the entire Hidden Leaf village. All the ninjas on the streets, whether ANBU on missions or Jonin instructing genin, stopped moving at the same time. A tremor originating from their very soul made them look up in horror. The light curtain hung high in the sky, and any ninjutsu, whether fire style or wind style, would automatically vanish when it came within 100 meters of it, as if it had never existed. The Grand Line, Marine Headquarters, Marine Ford. The atmosphere in the plaza was tense. Admiral Akainu's right arm had completely turned into molten lava, the intense heat distorting the air, as he prepared to execute Fire Fist Ace. Suddenly, his face, which was etched with absolute justice, froze, and he looked up abruptly. The sky was replaced by a giant, all-encompassing curtain of light. The light screen flowed with light and shadow he couldn't understand, emanating an aura that belonged neither to Haki nor to any devil fruit power. An unprecedented sense of unease caused Akainu's magma-like fist to freeze in mid-air. Soul Society, Siritii. Above Siritii, the usually clear sky was forcibly torn apart. A massive light curtain stretched across the sky, and the energy fluctuations that did not belong to spirit particles, nor to voids, nor even to any known world, caused the expressions of all the captains of the Godai 13 to change instantly. Captain Commander Yamamoto Genryusai Shigakuni slowly opened his eyes, and for the first time, pure astonishment appeared in those eyes that had witnessed 1,000 years of history. Academy City. As Kamijo Toma walked across the iron bridge, lamenting his misfortune, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. In the cafe next to the Tokiwada Middle School dormitory, Misaka Mikoto was about to apply an electric shock to a cup of coffee when the electric light at her fingertips suddenly went out. They, like the 2.3 million teachers and students in the city, raised their heads at the same time. A massive light curtain, undetectable by scientific instruments, unaffected by superpowers, and indestructible by any physical means, hovered before everyone's eyes. Then, under the shocked, terrified, and bewildered gazes of countless worlds and countless beings, clear, understandable characters slowly appeared on the screen of light. The multiverse is about to begin airing. Meanwhile, at Lin Yu's observatory. With a snap, all the windows on his laptop screen automatically closed, and in their place appeared a notification box he had never seen before, minimalist in style yet full of unknown technological flair. The signal has been connected to the unobservable universe. The projection file test file has been confirmed. Creating the All Realms playlist. Lin Yu's pupils suddenly contracted. The unobservable universe. All the heavens and myriad realms. These words, when put together, made his blood seem to freeze instantly. An indescribable chill shot from his tailbone straight to the top of his head, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. He lunged forward, trying to shut down the brass device. But the old, lever-like switch on the instrument seemed to be welded to the machine body, and no matter how hard he tried, it wouldn't budge. Turn it off. Turn it off right now. He abandoned the power switch and frantically tried to unplug the computer's connection cable. However, as soon as his fingers touched the interface, he found that the data cable seemed to have come to life, or rather, it was completely locked by an invisible force and could not be pulled out at all. There was a strange, sticky feeling coming from the interface between the metal and the plastic, as if it had become part of the computer and the brass instrument. Stop! Stop now! Lin Yu's voice trembled uncontrollably. He stared wide-eyed at the lines of cold text on the computer screen, then at the brass instrument that was still humming in a low voice. An absurd idea that sent chills down his spine rushed into his mind. Multiverse projection. All the heavens and myriad worlds. What he imported was a video of battles from Demon Slayer that he had edited. These anime clips seemed to have been genuinely treated as real footage and shown to the real other world. Chapter 2. The Myriad Realms fell into an eerie silence. Whether on a battlefield engulfed in gunfire or in a bustling city, all living beings were forced to stop what they were doing at this moment. Swords froze in mid-slash, bullets hovered at the moment of leaving the barrel, and even the wind seemed to have lost the courage to flow. Everyone looked up at the indescribable light screen, their breath caught in an invisible force. Resentment and probing erupted after a brief period of silence. In Konoha village, a jonin rapidly formed hand seals and roared, "Fire release, great fireball technique!" A huge fireball roared into the sky, but when it was 100 meters away from the light screen, it was swallowed up by an invisible giant mouth, disappearing without a trace, leaving not even a spark. At naval headquarters, the cannon barrel on the chest of a pacifist blazed on, and a blazing laser beam shot precisely into the sky. However, that beam, powerful enough to pierce steel, transformed into the purest particles of light after reaching a certain critical point and quietly dissipated. In the Seireitei, a court official released his Zanpakuto and unleashed a powerful slash. The sharp spiritual pressure vanished before it even touched the area covered by the light barrier. Ninjutsu, devil fruits, Kido, superpowers. All the power that humanity can wield seems so pale and powerless in the face of this light screen. It transcends all known laws. It allows no resistance. Under absolute, despairing pressure, faint light gathered above the light screen. Countless points of light coalesced and flowed, eventually transforming into lines of awe-inspiring gilded characters. A review of the 10 greatest godlike battles across the Myriad Realms. The title alone was enough to make the hearts of countless top experts in the world stop. Marine Headquarters, Marine Ford. Marshal Sengoku's office door was suddenly pushed open, and he himself was already standing in front of the window, his justice cloak draped behind him moving without wind. He stared intently at the words in the sky, his usually composed face clouded with gloom. All the heavens and myriad worlds. His voice suppressed a tremendous tremor, his fists clenched unconsciously, and his knuckles groaned under the strain. Whose prank is this? Such scale, such power, could it be that a lost ancient weapon has been resurrected? The top of the tower in Omegakure, in the world of Naruto. The cold rain washed over the cold steel city, and Pain Tendu stood on the edge of the tower, letting the rain soak his Akatsuki robe. Those Rinnegan eyes, possessing supreme power, reflected the light curtain in the sky, with purple ripples spreading violently in concentric circles. A war of gods that shook the world, a roundup? Who is it? His icy voice seemed capable of freezing raindrops. Who is spying on this world, and who has the right to judge God? Behind him, Conan's figure quietly appeared. She looked at Pain's back, her eyes filled with worry. She could feel Pain's chakra fluctuating violently. This man, who called himself God, experienced for the first time what it felt like to be looked down upon by a higher dimensional being. Jujutsu Kaisen World, Tokyo Metropolitan Jujutsu Higher Specialized School. Gojo Satoru stood on the playground with one hand in his pocket, looking up at the light screen that even his 6 eyes could not see through. There's too much information. Too many to equal 0. His brain was frantically processing the flood of information, but could only come to one conclusion: that thing did not exist within any known concept. Oh! He suddenly took off his blindfold with great interest. A pair of azure eyes, seemingly containing the entire starry sky, were completely exposed to the air. God's War? That's quite an boast. He grinned, revealing a cynical smile, and lightly touched the roof of his mouth with the tip of his tongue. Let me see just how amazing it is. The light screen ignored the astonishment, anger, or expectation of the masses. The screen continued to scroll, revealing more gilded characters that, with an undeniable air, announced the theme of the first roundup. Top 10, Blood Ties. Breath of the Sun in Desperate Circumstances. This headline has once again caused a huge uproar. Most of the world's powerful figures find this title puzzling. Breath of the Sun? Is it some special way of using energy? Or is it the name of some powerful being? Blood ties and bonds? They sound weak and powerless. The world of Bleach, Los Notches. Aizen Saoshik sat upright on the pure white throne, his chin resting on one hand, his eyes slightly narrowed behind his glasses. He looked at the words on the screen, a gentle yet slightly contemptuous smile curving his lips. Blood ties and bonds. He spoke softly, his voice echoing in the empty royal palace. What an incredibly boring opening. I hope you won't disappoint me too much. However, in a particular world, this title stirred up a massive wave that was enough to overturn everything. Demon Slayer, the Yubayashiki family. In the tranquil courtyard, the current head of the family, Kaguya Yubayashiki, was reclining on the veranda, listening to his wife's report. When the words appeared on the screen of light in the sky, an indescribable radiance suddenly burst forth from his face, which was eroded by the curse and nearly decayed. Cough, cough. He coughed violently, his frail body trembling uncontrollably, as if it were about to fall apart at any moment. Yoya, adult. His wife, Tianyan, quickly stepped forward to support him. Kaguya Yubayashiki grabbed her wrist with astonishing force, unlike someone who was about to die. He struggled to lift his head, his blind eyes seemingly piercing through time and space, staring intently at the sky. His lips trembled, and every word took all his strength to utter. Sunday. Sun breathing. Could it be, could it be? A single, murky tear slid down his festering eye. Those were tears of hope. At the same time, an alternate dimension located in a space-time rift. Infinite City. There is no sky, no earth, countless buildings are inverted, intertwined, and stacked in a way that defies the laws of physics, forming a bizarre and twisted labyrinth. At the deepest part of the maze, a handsome yet otherworldly man dressed in a Western-style suit was lazily resting on a platform. He is the pinnacle of all ghosts, the source of all fear. The ancestor of demons, Kibutsuji Muzan. He had just dealt with a meddlesome lower lord and was enjoying this space that belonged only to him and that he had absolute control over. Until, the light screen also appeared in the sky above the Infinite City. He glanced at it with displeasure, feeling slightly annoyed by this unexpected turn of events that was beyond his control. When the title TOP10 appeared, he even scoffed. Bloodline? Bond? How ridiculous and fragile human emotions are. However, the moment the words breath of the sun came into his view, time seemed to stand still. Laziness, arrogance, disdain, all those expressions vanished from his face in an instant, replaced by a deep-seated, soul-deep fear. The Sunday breathes in. He suddenly opened his scarlet vertical pupils wide, each word sounding as if squeezed out from between his teeth, with a harsh, metallic scraping sound. This word. This word, which he thought had long been buried by time and completely erased from history. It was like the most vicious curse, piercing precisely into the deepest part of his soul, touching that nightmare that he had sealed away for nearly 1,000 years, a nightmare that would make him shudder every time he thought of it. Impossible. Muzan Kibutsuji's face began to contort, and veins bulged on his handsome face, like ugly earthworms wriggling under his skin. That thing, that breathing technique, should have disappeared along with that monster long ago. His voice was filled with unbelievable rage, but beneath that rage lay an almost overflowing panic that even he himself was unwilling to admit. Who is it? Who would dare to mention it again? Boom! The entire infinite city began to tremble violently due to his intense emotional fluctuations. Countless buildings collapsed and reassembled, and space itself emitted a mournful cry of unbearable strain. The boundless rage and fear of the progenitor of demons swept across the entire alternate dimension. Chapter 3. The aftershocks of the violent tremors in the infinite city have not yet completely subsided. The spatial storm unleashed by Muzan Kibutsuji's shock, anger, and fear continued to rage in every corner of the twisted labyrinth. His chest heaved violently, and the bulging veins on his handsome, almost demonic face writhed like ugly centipedes, ruining the false beauty. Breathing of the Sunday. He squeezed the word out between his teeth, each syllable carrying a deep-seated hatred and a tremor that even he himself could not suppress. The forbidden name that he personally erased from the river of history and buried completely with bloodshed and slaughter is now being proclaimed to all the heavens and worlds in a way that he cannot understand or control at all. What an irony! What a humiliation! Meanwhile, at the Demon Slayer Corps headquarters. Despite his frail body, Kagura Yubiashiki unleashed astonishing strength as he gripped his wife Amina's wrist tightly, his knuckles turning white from the force. His eyes, which had long lost their luster, now seemed to ignite like two blazing flames, staring straight at the sky. Breathing of the Sunday. He chewed on those 4 words repeatedly. They weren't a question, but a confirmation of something lost and found, almost choked with emotion. The severed tradition and lost hope have miraculously reappeared in the darkest and most desperate moment. That was the original and strongest force that could tip the scales of the nearly 1,000-year-old bloody war between humans and demons. Heavenly sound. Kagura Yubiashiki's voice trembled, yet carried an unprecedented firmness. Help me up. I want to witness it with my own eyes. Meanwhile, in another dimension, inside a high-tech observatory, Lin Yu was covered in sweat and slumped into a chair in despair. He gave up all struggle. Physical power outage is ineffective. Upon forced disassembly, the instrument's outer casing proved to be more robust than anticipated. This brass projector of unknown origin seems like an independent, uninterrupted collection of laws, arbitrarily executing its play commands. He could only raise his head and, like countless other beings in the world, become a spectator of this magnificent miracle. The brief silence on the light screen, triggered by the words "breath of the sun," was broken. The screen officially lit up. A sickening rustling sound was clearly transmitted to the ears of every audience member through the light screen, as if countless insects were crawling around their ears. The opening scene caused countless people to feel physically uncomfortable. It was a forest. A forest steeped in death and despair. A strange blood moon hung high in the night sky, casting a light that was not a cool silver glow, but a viscous, dark red color, like congealed blood. In the light, spider webs covered the forest floor. The spider silk was thick and tough, with white cocoons hanging on it, swaying slightly in the night breeze. It was unclear whether they contained life or death. Countless eerie spiders darted swiftly among the shadows of the trees. They have the bodies of spiders, but their faces are twisted with pain. The eyes on those people's faces were still moving, filled with pleading and fear, and their mouths opened and closed silently, as if emitting a shrill scream. Vomit. Countless viewers around the world felt their stomachs churn the moment they saw this scene. This challenges people's psychological defenses even more than simple bloodshed and violence. The camera moves, passing through layers of thick spider webs, and finally focuses. A young boy is struggling through this hellish mountain forest. He had a noticeable scar on his forehead, and on his left ear he wore a pair of antique paper earrings with a sun pattern that swayed gently with his movements. He wasn't particularly tall, and was even somewhat thin, but his steps were exceptionally firm, and there was no sign of retreat in his eyes. Most striking was the ominous wooden box he carried on his back. In such an eerie environment, the box exuded an indescribable mystery. The world of Naruto, Konoha village. Naruto Uzumaki, who had just finished a mission and was sitting on the roof eating instant noodles, suddenly spat out a mouthful of noodles. Wow! He pointed at the light screen, his face filled with shock and curiosity. Where is this place? It's disgusting. His gaze was immediately drawn to the wooden box. What's that big brother carrying? It's a strange box. Is it a quest item? Beside him, the white-haired Jonin Kakashi Hatake put down his copy of Ika Ika Paradise, and a scrutinizing light gleamed in his exposed eye. He couldn't sense even the slightest fluctuation of chakra from the boy named Kamatu Tanjiro. But that pure tenacity, that indomitable will that emanated from the depths of his soul, made even this elite Jonin, who had seen countless life and death situations and geniuses, take notice. This young man is a rough gem. One Piece world, the going merry. Wah-ah-ah-ah-ah. A piercing scream shattered the peaceful night sky. Usopp used both hands and feet to leap up the mast at an astonishing speed, holding on tightly, his face instantly covered in tears and snot. Spider. A spider with a human face. Luffy. Chopper. What the hell is this place? We need to turn around. Run. Captain Luffy, however, did not smile. His face, adorned with a straw hat, held an unusual seriousness. He could read a kind of persistence in the boy's eyes. He seems to be looking for someone. In the scene, Tanjiro's journey is interrupted. From the shadows of the forest, several figures suddenly sprang out, wielding Nichiren blades in a contorted, biomechanically inefficient manner as they attacked him. Their joints were visibly tethered by spider silk, like marionettes, their eyes vacant, having long since lost their souls. They are members of the Demon Slayer Corps. They were former companions. The chilling laughter of the mother spider demon echoed through the forest as she manipulated the corpses, launching indiscriminate attacks. Tanjiro's expression instantly turned extremely grave. He took a deep breath, his nostrils flaring slightly. He didn't use his eyes to capture the puppet's movements, but rather his sense of smell. He smelled it. That nauseating, rotten smell that clung to his companions. And there's the smell of spider silk, finer than a hair, yet deadly. His body reacted instantly, dodging and weaving through the gaps in the flashing blades with an agility far exceeding the limits of ordinary people. Each of his dodges was precise to the millimeter, the blade grazing his uniform and creating gusts of wind. In the brief moment after dodging a round of attacks, he drew his Nichiren blade from his waist. The blade is jet black, simple and unadorned. He lowered his waist and twisted, his body muscles tensing and relaxing in a peculiar rhythm. A long, deep breath escaped from his mouth, turning into white mist. Water breathing, fourth form, strike tide. The next moment, a scene appeared that made the pupils of countless powerful beings in all the heavens and myriad realms shrink in shock. As he swung his sword, a deep blue tide, constructed purely from swordsmanship and resembling a ukiyo-e style, appeared out of thin air. That's not real water. There were no elemental fluctuations, and no energy was emitted. That is the ultimate image produced when swordsmanship, breathing, strength, and spirit are highly unified. Whoosh! The tide surged, and the blades gleamed fiercely. This sword strike precisely targeted the spider silk that was manipulating its companions. Throughout the Myriad Realms, countless powerful beings accustomed to world-destroying abilities witnessed for the first time this kind of combat style, one that relied on devil fruits, ninjutsu, curse power, or spiritual pressure, a style that was both simple and profound. The world of Bleach, Siridei. Rukia Kukaki looked up at the sky, her face filled with astonishment. What is that? The path of the demons. She immediately denied it. No, there's absolutely no spiritual pressure fluctuation. It's just a simple slash, so why is it producing such an unusual phenomenon? In the Naruto world, at the training grounds of Konoha village, a man in a green bodysuit flashed his gleaming teeth and gave a thumbs up. Oh! I can feel it. Might Guy's passion was instantly ignited, and the background behind him seemed to be ablaze. This is a pinnacle of physical techniques that perfectly combines breathing methods with swordsmanship. Through special breathing, it unleashes the body's deepest potential. Burn. This is youth. In a dark, sunless alley in Academy City, a white-haired boy leaned against the wall, glanced casually at the light curtain in the sky, and then looked away. A sneer of utter disdain curled at the corner of Accelerator's mouth. Weak and powerless. His voice was filled with absolute arrogance, as if he were commenting on the struggle of an ant. This level of slash can't even penetrate the surface of my reflection. What an incredibly boring war of gods. Chapter 4. Before the white-haired youth's disdainful sneer had completely faded from the screen, the scene suddenly shifted. The previous title sword intent had vanished completely. Instead, there is a kind of oppressive feeling that makes one shudder from the very marrow of one's bones. The darkness in the forest seemed to materialize, so thick it was impossible to dissolve. A stench, a mixture of rotting earth and the stench of wild beasts, forcefully assaulted the nostrils. Thump! Thump! Heavy footsteps sounded, each one causing the earth to tremble slightly. A colossal creature emerged from the shadows. Its body was twisted and bloated, the human outline stretched to its limit, muscles bulging, and skin with a hard, rock-like grey hue. Its face was covered by a spider's face, and 6 scarlet compound eyes gleamed with an inorganic, ferocious light. Nadagumoyama, the father spider demon. Beside Tanjiro, a boy wearing a boar head mask let out a beast-like roar. Charge recklessly! Hashabira Inashug's legs unleashed astonishing power, his entire body transforming into a blurry afterimage as he charged towards the mountain of flesh. It was precisely this fearless, savage spirit that had allowed him to survive this demonic mountain until now. His prized twin swords flashed with 2 intersecting, cold light under the moonlight. Beast breathing, third fang, fang tear. The blade slashed precisely at the neck of Father, Spider Demon. However, the expected scene of carnage did not occur. Clang! The sound didn't feel like it was striking flesh and blood, it was more like 2 iron hammers slamming into granite. Sparks flew everywhere. Inashug felt an irresistible force rebound from the blade, instantly splitting his hand open and drawing blood. His twin blades left only 2 shallow white marks on his indestructible skin. Father Spider Demon didn't even look down at him. His arm, thicker than an adult's waist, came down with a simple and direct punch, accompanied by a whooshing sound as it tore through the air. Inashug's beastly instincts screamed a warning, but his body was paralyzed by the immense force of the shockwave, rendering him unable to move. Click! A crisp cracking sound rang out. It wasn't the sound of bones. It's a knife. Inashug's 2 Nichiren blades, which had accompanied him through countless days and nights, shattered under that devastating punch. Woe, my knife! A desperate roar came from under the boar's headgear. The enormous, fan-like hand did not pause for a moment, carrying the shadow of death as it crushed down upon his tiny body. The world of Bleach, the Siridei, the 11th Division Barracks. A tall man with an eye patch and bells tied to the ends of his hair grinned, revealing a set of sharp, shark-like teeth. Kenpei Kizaraki excitedly licked his chapped lips. Oh! His voice was hoarse, yet it carried an irrepressible fervor. This guy with the pig's head is pitifully weak, but deep down he's got a bit of a fearless streak. Interesting. The world of One Piece, Whole Cake Island. Charlotte Linlin was stuffing a handful of colorful candies into her mouth, her enormous tongue making a satisfied sound. She glanced at the scene on the screen and snorted coldly. Oh my god, what a useless son. This kind of trash can't even protect my snacks. If it were my son, he would have blown it away by now. Within the light curtain, a critical moment loomed. Tanjiro's figure moved. His chest heaved violently, each breath seeming to squeeze every last drop of air from his lungs before greedily inhaling new oxygen. Strength. He needs more power. Concentrate all your strength, all your will, all your breath, into one point. Water breathing, picking up forms, flowing life. He no longer dodged or beat around the bush. He transformed into a spinning top, his jet black Nichiren blade creating a continuous, azure water dragon around him. The water dragon was no longer the tide, no longer the waves, but a vortex that was ever-flowing and whose power was layered upon layer. Spin. Accelerate. The blade collided head-on with that massive, log-like arm. Laugh. For the first time, the seemingly indestructible skin was torn open, and foul-smelling blood gushed out. The spinning blade, with unwavering resolve, severed the massive arm in two. The father spider demon let out a painful roar, his massive body retreating backward. Inashuk was saved. Tanjiro leaned on his sword, breathing heavily, every muscle in his body groaning in pain. This blow almost exhausted all his strength. However, this was only the beginning of despair. The temperature of the surrounding air dropped sharply. A deeper and more ancient malice than that of the father spider demon silently enveloped the entire forest. A figure appeared before them without them noticing. That was a child. He had long, snow-white hair, blood-red eyes, and his face and hands were covered with strange spider web patterns. He simply stood there quietly, without exuding any powerful aura, yet Tanjiro felt every cell in his body scream. Danger! Escape! Run! Tanjiro's gaze was fixed intently on the child's left eye. Two Huxia characters were clearly etched in those blood-red pupils. Lower Moon 5. In the world of Demon Slayer, all the Demon Slayer Corps members who were watching this scene through various means held their breath. Their faces showed a mixture of fear and despair. Lower String Demon. It's the 12 Demon Moons. Run! Tanjiro. That's not an enemy you can handle. That was a fear etched into the very bones of every Demon Slayer Corps member. The 12 Demon Moons were the 12 strongest demons under Muzan Kibutsuji's command. Each one possessed terrifying power comparable to that of a pillar. The lower moon is the absolute elite among them. That was an existence that no one could rival beneath the pillar. Inside the infinite city, Kibutsuji Muzan stared coldly at the light screen with his crimson eyes. Tired. To him, this was nothing more than a slightly useful pawn. His life and death, his struggles, could not stir any ripples in his heart. That's all. On Mount Nadagumo, the child named Rai didn't even lift a finger. He simply raised one finger. A slight movement of the fingertips. Call out. Several threads, almost invisible to the naked eye, hurtled through the air at supersonic speeds. Tanjiro's sense of smell detected the deadly aura, and his body reacted at its limit, swinging his sword to block. However, it was no use. Spider silk, finer than a human hair, possesses a toughness and sharpness far exceeding that of steel. The moment the Nichiren blade collided with the spider silk, an overwhelming force surged forth. Tanjiro's body was easily pulled off the ground, and he was bound by spider silk, hanging in mid-air. The silk thread dug deep into his flesh, tearing through his team uniform. Fresh blood, drop by drop, meandered down the crystal-clear spider silk. Snap! The drop landed on the fern leaves below, staining them with a striking red. Throughout the Myriad Realms, countless viewers felt a sense of suffocation. The art style suddenly changed. One moment it was a passionate, desperate struggle where the weak triumphed over the strong. The next moment, however, brought absolute, incomprehensible, and overwhelming despair. This creature called Ghost possesses cruel and bizarre methods, especially its near-immortal regenerative abilities, and the unreasonable level of power it is currently displaying, which exceeds the comprehension of many worlds. Spells return to the world. Fushiguro Megami frowned deeply. This resilience is far superior to that of ordinary cursed spirits. He looked at the spider demon in the picture, whose severed arm was rapidly regenerating, and analyzed in a deep voice. Is it necessary to destroy the head with a single blow using magical power? Beside him, the white-haired man wearing an eye patch had his hands in his pockets, looking relaxed. No, Megami. Gojo Satoru's voice was as light and cheerful as ever, yet it carried a decisive air of knowing everything. Look, that tired one, he's completely unharmed. This boy is going to lose. Chapter 5. Fresh blood, drop by drop, meandered down the crystal-clear spider silk. Snap! The drop landed on the fern leaves below, staining them with a striking red. Tanjiro's consciousness ebbed and flowed amidst blood loss and excruciating pain. His lungs were completely drained of air, and each breath pulled at the threads digging into his flesh, bringing a tearing pain. My vision has begun to blur. A faint, almost imperceptible sound of footsteps approached from afar. The sound of footsteps on rotten leaves produced no sense of weight, yet it caused Tanjiro's body, suspended in mid-air, to instinctively tense up. That child! The fifth lower moon named Rai was slowly walking towards him. He didn't look at Tanjiro's face, which was contorted with pain, or even at the hideous wounds on his body. His gaze, those blood-red, emotionless eyes, went straight past Tanjiro and landed on the small, rustic wooden box behind him. A naked, undisguised possessiveness emerged in those eyes. The female ghost in that box, give it to me. Lei finally spoke, his voice flat and devoid of any emotional fluctuation, yet it carried an unquestionable command. He raised his head and finally looked at Tanjiro, his face displaying a strange expression that was a mixture of childlike innocence and demonic ruthlessness. She will become my sister. We will build real bonds. Bonds. These two words, like a red-hot branding iron, were fiercely seared into the depths of Tanjiro's soul. In an instant, all the pain, all the fear, all the despair were swallowed up by an even more violent emotion. Anger. It was a volcano erupting fiercely from the deepest part of the chest and the very bottom of the soul. Sumitaguchi. Tanjiro let out a heart-wrenching roar, his vocal cords tearing from the excessive force, his voice hoarse like a broken gong. He was suspended in mid-air, yet his body unleashed an unimaginable power. His muscles bulged, his bones groaned under the strain, and the spider silk binding his limbs tightened inch by this force driven purely by will, emitting a teeth-grinding crunch. My family. My sister. My bond. Tanjiro's eyes were bloodshot and red-rimmed. He stared intently at Rui, each word sounding like a desperate roar. This is not something a cold-blooded person like you can say. Crash. Crash. He managed to break free of the spider silk binding his arms. This is not because the spider silk is fragile, but because the force has exceeded the limits of the human body. Tanjiro plummeted from mid-air, his feet landing heavily on the ground. His knees buckled, and he nearly collapsed. With his last ounce of strength, he braced himself with one hand, while his other hand gripped the Nichiren blade that had been with him all this time. He rushed out. There was no method, no breathing technique, and not even any tactics. That was just an older brother launching a desperate attack to protect his last remaining family member. However, what greeted him was Lei's still cold eyes. A hint of indifference, bordering on pity, even appeared on the child's face. He raised his hand, his fingertips cutting his palm. The crimson blood quickly stained the spider silk extending from his fingertips. The once crystal-clear silk threads turned an ominous, chilling crimson the moment they came into contact with blood. A strong smell of rust filled the air, along with something even more, dangerous. Blood demon art, engraved line prison. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The sound of the blood-red threads tearing through the air became sharp and mournful. They are no longer simple cutting tools, but blades imbued with a deeper curse. The threads intertwined in the air, instantly weaving into a massive, impenetrable net that descended upon Tanjiro. The blood flowing on the grid emitted an eerie light, and its hardness far exceeded that of steel. Tanjiro's pupils contracted to their maximum size. He poured all his strength and will into the knife in his hand. Facing that web of death, he swung his final blade. However, clang! A crisp, ear-piercing metallic snap echoed throughout the entire Nada Spider Mountain. This sound also clearly resounded throughout all the heavens and Myriad Realms. One Piece World. On a small boat in the East Blue, Zoro abruptly stopped his sword-swinging practice. His brows furrowed, and his gaze was fixed on the broken sword reflected in the light screen. The knife broke. His voice carried a hint of disbelief. Was the knife too fragile, or were the threads too stiff? With his discerning eye, he could naturally see the boy's resolute determination in his final strike. Such a blow was certainly not something a cheap knife could withstand. Therefore, there is only one answer. In the world of Naruto, in a dark underground base, Orochimaru's golden snake eyes gleamed with extreme excitement and obsession. He stuck out his long tongue and licked his pale lips. Use your own blood to strengthen the threads. His voice was filled with a morbid longing. Truly, an interesting physical mutation. Using blood as a medium to unleash an enhancement effect similar to a cursed seal, yet it feels completely natural. If only I could capture one and study it. Despair. It was a deeper and more complete despair than being suspended in mid-air just now. The weapon, the swordsman's life, is gone. Tanjiro froze. He stared blankly at the half-broken hilt of the knife in his hand, and the cold, fragmented blade lying on the ground. The blood-red spider web was already within reach. He could even smell the blood emanating from above and feel the sharp aura cutting through his skin. Am I going to die? I'm sorry, Nezuko. Brother, I failed to protect you. At this critical moment. Boom! The wooden box he had been carrying on his back suddenly burst open. Amidst the flying sawdust, a small figure appeared with a speed that surpassed the limits of human dynamic vision. Without the slightest hesitation, she spread her arms and stood in front of Tanjiro. It's Nezuko. Pfft! The blood-red, indestructible silk threads mercilessly cut into that petite body. Blood gushed out instantly, like a flood bursting its banks. Nezuko's arms, shoulders, and back were slashed with several deep wounds that exposed bone. Time seemed to slow down at this moment. The movement stopped because I was tired. For the first time, a crack appeared on his perpetually icy face. He was stunned. For the first time, a feeling of confusion appeared in his blood-red pupils. He had imagined countless possibilities. The ghost inside the box will take the opportunity to escape. The demon inside the box will come out and attack the demon slayer swordsman, competing with him for the prey. The ghost inside the box trembles with fear. But this was the only one he hadn't thought of. This ghost, a creature that is clearly of the same kind as himself, actually took the initiative to stand up and use his own body to protect a mere human. 1. A demon slayer core swordsman who is going to kill them. You. For the first time, his tired voice carried a hint of emotion. Why should we protect him? No one can answer this question. This scene was also projected into the Demon Slayer world through the light screen, into the bizarrely constructed, space-inverted infinite castle. The faint hint of pleasure that had appeared on Muzan Kibutsuji's handsome yet sinister face, which was initially drawn by the fact that the lower Moon 5 had easily crushed the Demon Slayer core swordsman, instantly froze. The next second, his scarlet vertical pupils suddenly contracted into a deadly straight line. The rage and hatred on that face receded like a tide, replaced by an unprecedented shock. He felt it. That aura. That unique, out-of-control flawed item that he had been searching for so long. It's Nezuko. How could that be? Why would she be with a demon slayer core swordsman? Why didn't she eat people? Why? Muzan Kibutsuji couldn't understand it. His mindset, which had been operating for thousands of years and viewed all things as pawns, was violently shaken at this moment. He couldn't comprehend what was happening before his eyes. Why would this traitor protect a demon slayer core swordsman? For the first time, his anger shifted from the bone-deep fear of breathing of the sun to the variable before him that was completely beyond his expectations. What are you? Chapter 6. What are you? Muzan Kibutsuji's roar echoed in the distorted and inverted space of the Infinity Castle, but it could not reach the forest shrouded in blood-red spider webs. The question is unanswerable. The answer is unfolding. Nezuko used her petite body as a shield to protect her brother behind her. With her back to Tanjiro, her once gentle pink eyes were now fixed intently on Rui in front of her. There was no fear, no hesitation, only a wild, determined resolve to protect her cub. The weary silk threads, those blood-red spider webs strong enough to cut through gold and stone, were relentlessly slicing through her body. Pft! Pft! New wounds keep appearing, while old wounds are healing at a rate that defies common sense. That wasn't a slow, creeping motion, but a boiling, regeneration. The flesh and blood sizzled and burned, billowing white steam. The severed muscle fibers twisted and reconnected wildly, and new skin crawled over the deep wound that exposed bone at a visible speed. In just a few breaths, it was completely restored, leaving only a piece of clothing soaked in blood. This regeneration rate. This near-immortal regenerative ability. As the fifth lower moon demon, Rui's regenerative abilities are beyond the reach of ordinary demons. Yet, compared to the girl before him, he seems so slow. Demon Slayer, the Infinity Castle. The light screen projected this scene clearly in front of each ghost. Dead silence. All the upper and lower moons stopped breathing. Upper Moon 3, Akaza, leaned slightly forward, his muscular body, edged with tattoos of sinners, his golden beastly eyes narrowing into dangerous slits. He never bothered to pay attention to the struggles of the weak, but at this moment, the female ghost on the screen had captured his entire attention. This female ghost is very strong. His voice was deep, carrying a scrutinizing quality unique to martial arts enthusiasts. Her recovery ability is almost comparable to that of an upper-level magnum opus. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the terrified human swordsman behind the girl, his brow furrowing. But, why would she protect that human? Wow! A boastful exclamation broke the silence. Upper Moon 2, Doma, excitedly clapped his golden iron fan, his rainbow-colored eyes gleaming with delight. This is so touching. The brother-sister relationship is so moving. I almost cried. He wore a compassionate smile, but his eyes held no genuine warmth, only an appreciation for this wonderful drama. On the screen, the weariness of patience was being rapidly exhausted. He couldn't understand it. He couldn't accept it. This fellow human with such immense power, this sister who should have been his perfect family, repeatedly defied him for the sake of a lowly human. My disobedient little sister. A cold, tired voice rang out, and the last trace of confusion vanished from that youthful face, replaced by an absolute, unquestionable desire for dominance. Discipline is needed. The moment he finished speaking, he suddenly clenched his 5 fingers. Buzz! The threads wrapped around Nezuko tightened instantly, emitting a teeth-grinding vibrating sound. Her petite body was instantly lifted from the ground, her limbs being pulled and bound by sharp threads at an extremely cruel angle, leaving her suspended in mid-air. Ugh! Nezuko let out a painful groan. The wound that had just healed was torn open again, deeper and more thoroughly. Those threads, tougher than steel, dug deep into her flesh, almost snapping her bones. Blood, following the trail of the silk threads, flowed down like a waterfall, pooling on the ground into a glaring pool of blood. Lei tried to use extreme pain to make her submit, to make her wail, and to make her understand who the real master was. The Naruto world. Uchiha Itachi stood in the Akatsuki organization's base, his Sharingan, which could see through everything, staring motionlessly at the light screen. He looked at the girl who was covered in wounds from protecting her brother, hanging high in the air, yet still staring intently at the enemy. For the first time, a subtle, indescribable ripple flickered in the depths of those usually calm and collected eyes. He thought of his younger brother. Sasuke, the younger brother he protected with everything, yet whom he pushed into the abyss with his own hands. Is this, the power of family? His voice was barely audible, with a slight tremor that he himself was unaware of. Transcending race, transcending curse. On the deck of the Thousand Sunny in the world of One Piece. Bang! Luffy slammed his fist into the railing of the ship's side, and the hardwood instantly dented with a fist-sized dent. That damn octopus head! He gritted his teeth, veins bulging on his forehead, and the shadow under his straw hat couldn't hide the burning rage in his eyes. Let her go. Pain. The pain of flesh and bone being torn apart. Consciousness was tossed about in a tsunami of pain. Nezuko's vision began to blur, and all she could hear was her own rapid breathing due to the excruciating pain. Give up? To yield? Just as her will was about to be devoured by this endless torment. A gentle voice, as if from the depths of a distant memory, echoed softly in her mind. Nezuko. It was my mother's voice. Protect my brother. You must protect your brother. Elder brother. Tanjiro. This thought, like a thunderclap, instantly cleaved through all the darkness and pain. Roar. A roar, unlike any human's, filled with boundless rage and power, erupted from the depths of Nezuko's throat. Her eyes widened suddenly. At that moment, all the blood vessels in her body bulged wildly, and grotesque blue veins, like twisted vines, instantly crawled all over her fair skin, spreading from her neck to her cheeks. The bamboo tube she was biting so hard made a creaking sound under unimaginable force, almost being completely crushed. Flame-red patterns suddenly appeared centered on her forehead and spread across her entire body at an astonishing speed. Her aura had changed. It is no longer simply the ferocity of a ghost, but a mixture of an ancient, fiery, and explosive power. She stared intently at the indestructible threads binding her body, channeling all her strength, will, and protective instincts into her blood. She unleashed a final, beast-like roar at the source of this bondage and suffering. Blood Demon Art, Blood Explosion. Chapter 7. Boom. A blazing pink flame, seemingly capable of incinerating everything, suddenly erupted from Nezuko's blood. Hiss. Those spider silks that could easily cut through steel emitted a sharp hiss the moment they came into contact with the flames, instantly igniting and turning into ashes. 1. 10. 100. The strong threads binding his limbs snapped with every breath. Having lost all support, Nezuko's petite body plummeted straight down from mid-air. Demon Slayer, the Infinity Castle. Dead silence. A deathly silence that would make any ghost tremble. Crack. A soft sound. The exquisite white porcelain teacup in Muzan Kibutsuji's hand shattered without warning, scalding tea and sharp shards sliding down the surface, yet he seemed oblivious. He suddenly stood up from the throne. The movement was so fast and so powerful that even the throne beneath it groaned under the weight. His scarlet, vertical pupils, which seemed to contain an endless abyss, were fixed on the void before him, where space was distorted, presenting the scene of Mount Nagagumo. His body, that perfect physique that surpassed all ghosts, was now trembling violently and uncontrollably. It wasn't because of excitement. It's not because of expectations. It was a fear that originated from the deepest part of his cells that gripped his heart, shattering his age-old elegance and composure in that instant. Impossible. His voice was no longer the deep, authoritative one it once was, Instead, it was sharp, distorted, and filled with disbelief and horror. That's absolutely impossible. Blood demon art. A lowly commoner who has only been a ghost for a year or two. A flawed product who betrayed his bloodline and refused to eat people. How could she possibly have awakened the blood demon art? This is beyond common sense. What terrified him even more was the color of the flames, the essence of the flames. Flame. It's still this kind of flame that restrains me. That nightmare, buried deep in his memory and tried to forget for thousands of years, still wakes him up in the middle of the night. That man, the one adorned with sun-shaped earrings and wielding a crimson sword, was like the embodiment of the sun. That man's breathing technique produced this kind of flame. A destructive fire that can leave permanent burns at the cellular level, which even his proud regenerative abilities cannot heal. Why? Why this lowly commoner? This traitor? To awaken this power. Muzan's features were contorted with extreme rage and fear, his handsome face becoming grotesque and terrifying. The blood within him roared and surged wildly, seemingly wanting to burst out of his body and crush the source of his threat with his own hands. Meanwhile, in another time and space, as Tanjiro was about to lose consciousness, his mind drifted into a pure white world. Snow. Universities everywhere. The cold air stung my lungs as I inhaled it. His body was in great pain, as if his bones were broken, but he couldn't feel it. There was only one figure in his sight. He is the father. The father, who was always ill and even walked unsteadily, was now dancing tirelessly in the snowy night. Kagura dance. Solemn and dignified, it carries a mysterious rhythm that connects with heaven and earth. The father's movements were slow, yet continuous, like a perfect circle with no beginning and no end. His breathing was long and deep, each inhale seemed to suck away the surrounding air, and each exhale carried a hot, white mist. Tanjiro. My father's voice echoed in my mind, not through my ears, but directly imprinted on my soul. Use the correct breathing technique. See, as long as you use the correct breathing technique, you can keep jumping. To make the body as hot as the Sunday. Hinokami Kagura. This name, like a morning bell and evening drum, struck his soul with great force. Tanjiro suddenly woke up. The moment he regained consciousness, the excruciating pain of his flesh being torn apart swept over him once again, but he couldn't care less. His eyes widened, and blood vessels instantly filled his eyeballs. He saw it. Nezuko. His sister is falling helplessly from the sky. Her thin body was covered with deep, bone-revealing wounds caused by the silk threads binding her, dripping with blood, like a blood-red flower about to wither. Nezuko. A hoarse, almost throat-ripping roar exploded from his chest. The blood in my whole body boiled at that moment. It wasn't just anger, it wasn't just sadness, but also an indescribable, burning power that awakened from the deepest part of his blood, washing over his limbs and bones. With his last ounce of strength, he gripped the half-broken Nichiren blade in his hand. Broken sword. But what he held in his hand at that moment seemed to be the sharpest divine weapon in the world. Under the extreme strain of excruciating pain and willpower, his body adopted a completely new stance that he had never practiced before, yet seemed to be engraved in his genes and flowed in his blood 1,000 times over. Demon Slayer Corps Headquarters. 2 lines of clear tears suddenly slid down Kaguya Yubayashiki's face, which was ravaged by the curse. His eyes, which had lost their sight, seemed to pierce through time and space, seeing that battlefield. He clenched his fists tightly, his nails digging deep into his palms, his body trembling with uncontrollable excitement. His wife, Tianyan, quickly helped him up. My husband. Yes. Kaguya Yubayashiki's voice trembled violently like never before, a mixture of ecstasy and grief at finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel after searching for hundreds of years. That's it. There's no mistake. This is the legendary. The first breath. Breathing of the sun. On the battlefield. Tanjiro's breathing technique changed completely at this moment. Each contraction of his lungs was like a bellows pumping a fierce wind into a furnace. Inhale. The air was compressed and turned into molten lava inside his body. Exhale. Hot air blew out of his mouth and nose, carrying visible white steam. The water-breathing effect around him, which was originally as blue as a stream, was completely evaporated and dissipated in that instant. Instead, there was a raging, endless flame, like the rising sun. The breath of water, the form of picking up, the flow of life. The thought flashed through his mind, only to be instantly rejected. No. Using this trick will still result in your neck being severed. It's too slow. The threads of weariness are too fast, too strong. The power of water breathing is no longer enough to sever this false bond. So, use this one. Use this breathing technique that has just awakened from the memories of one's bloodline. With the last inheritance left to him by his father. Hinokami Kagura, waltz. Under the utterly shocked gazes of all the spectators across the Myriad Realms. Under Muzan Kibutsuji's gaze, filled with horror and murderous intent. The dying boy, the boy who could barely stand, moved. He transformed into an unstoppable whirlwind of fire. The broken sword in his hand ignited a raging fire the moment it was swung, a fire powerful enough to burn away all evil in the world. That's no longer a knife. It was a miniature sun. With an indomitable, death-defying resolve, and a spirit that seemed determined to burn himself and his soul to ashes, he charged toward Rui, the lower moon 5, who was still standing there, not yet fully recovered from the shock of Nezuko's blood exploding. Chapter 8. Boom! Flames and blood clashed in an instant. That wasn't a clash between a knife and a thread, it was the rising sun crashing into the blood-red net solidified in the abyss. Tanjiro's Hinokami Kagura, waltz and Rui's strongest defense, Kurosen Densetsu, erupted with a deafening roar under the watchful eyes of everyone. The air was torn apart and ignited. The scorching heat wave, mixed with fragments of broken threads, swept wildly in all directions, carving scorched furrows into the ground. One Piece World. Hawkeye my hawk sat on his lonely little boat, polishing the supreme grade sword knight in his hand. His movements suddenly stopped. A dazzling glint flashed in those sharp eyes that seemed to see through all swordsmen in the world. He even leaned forward slightly, his gaze fixed firmly on that miniature, burning sun. What a fierce slash! His voice was deep, with a hint of inquiry. This will actually cause flames to entwine around the blade. No, those weren't ordinary flames. He stroked the cold hilt of night, feeling the pure, ultimate intent emanating from the light screen. It is a purer manifestation of a belief. The Naruto world. A cold and desolate sanctuary. Madara Uchiha sat cross-legged, his crimson Sharingan indifferently observing everything on the light screen. Fancy and gaudy. He let out a disdainful snort, an absolute arrogance born of standing at the pinnacle of power. In the face of absolute power, in the face of such all-encompassing power, flames of this magnitude are meaningless. However, the next second, the scene in the light screen caused a subtle ripple to appear in the depths of this legendary ninja's eyes for the first time. Tanjiro's sword is indeed just a broken sword. The broken blade, facing the spider silk that was as strong as steel, should have been like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. However, the fire god Kagura that is transformed from sun breathing is far superior to water breathing in terms of power, rank, and supreme attribute that surpasses all other breathing techniques. More importantly, it was that burning will that even Madara Uchiha couldn't ignore. On the battlefield, Tanjiro's body groaned, his bones broke inch by inch, and his muscles tore apart wildly. But his spirit and his will have never been so vigorous as they are now. Countless images flashed through his mind. My sister is freezing in the snow. Mr. Urokodaka's strict teaching. The final selection was made from the departed souls. On the streets of Asakusa, Muzan Kibutsuji's inhuman eyes shone through. And The father tirelessly danced the Kagura dance in the snow, over and over again. That's not dance. That is inheritance. That is hope. That is the sharp blade to slay demons. My bond with Nezuko. A cry from the depths of his soul exploded from his burning throat, resounding throughout the heavens and earth. No one can sever this bond. Boom! The flames erupted in that instant. It was no longer a special effect wrapped around the blade, but transformed into the real fire of the sun god that incinerated everything. Hiss hiss hiss! A sickening burning sound rang out. Those blood-red threads that Lei was so proud of, which he considered to be the most resilient in the world and could be easily cut by even the Nichiren blade, let out a shrill scream under the scorching heat of breath of the sun. They twisted, turned black, and finally turned into wisps of smoke, burning away completely. The engraved lines are broken. Lei's eyes, which were marked with the words Junior on them, instantly narrowed to their lowest point. What did he see? He saw that the weak human he should have toyed with and crushed at will had transformed into an unstoppable god of fire, charging towards him. His pride belonged to the 12 ghost months. His cruelty stemmed from the progenitor of demons. At that moment, he was utterly shattered and vanished completely. All that remained was the most primal, childlike fear. No. His lips trembled, unable to utter a complete syllable. Impossible. That's impossible. Humans. A mere broken sword. How could it possibly sever my silk threads? Tanjiro was already in front of him. There was not the slightest wavering in those eyes burning with golden flames, only a resolute determination to cut down everything. With a single slash. Without the slightest pause, without the slightest hesitation. His exhausted head, carrying a face full of fear and disbelief, flew high into the air. In his swirling vision, he saw his headless body. He saw the boy's figure, panting heavily, covered in blood, yet still standing firm. It's over? No. Not yet. As one of the 12 demon moons, even if one is beheaded by a Nichiren blade, as long as it's not a crimson blade, as long as it's not. He still has a chance. He can regenerate. Its last vestige of consciousness frantically urged its demonic blood, attempting to extend new spider silk from the severed neck and connect to the flying head. Once connected. Just a moment. However, in the instant his last thought arose. The other side of the battlefield. Nezuko, who has been bound in midair by spider silk, has not yet finished her mission. The moment Tanjiro launched his charge, she used up all her strength. Blood explosion. Boom. Pink flames spread wildly along the spider silk that was wrapped around her body and connected to her body. Those silk threads became the best conductors of the flame. The flames burned precisely and ruthlessly onto Rina's severed body. Sizzle. The demon blood boiled, and the power of regeneration was instantly evaporated under the scorching of the pink flames. The fleshy bud that had just emerged, attempting to connect with the head, turned into charcoal in the flames. The two siblings. On the front lines, he used the breathing technique passed down from his father to sever the enemy's head. One of them, providing support from the rear, used his awakened blood demon art to burn down the enemy's retreat route. One severed life. One has severed the road. A flawless collaboration. A seamless collaboration. In this desolate spider mountain, on the brink of life and death, they joined forces to slay the 5th lower moon of the 12 demon moons thanks to a bond that transcended life and death. All the heavens and myriad worlds. Countless viewers, deeply moved by this pure and passionate family affection, fell completely silent at that moment. There was no cheering. There was no applause. There is only one kind of throbbing and awe that comes from the depths of the soul. This is the true bond. Chapter 9. The inventory didn't stop after Tanjiro and his sister collapsed. The embers of that battlefield, burning with kinship and bonds, have not yet been extinguished. After killing Rui, Tanjiro's last bit of strength was completely drained away with that decisive strike. The will that had sustained him had finally reached its limit. The world began to spin and turn upside down in his vision. The boiling blood and thunderous heartbeat in my ears gradually faded away. Instead, an endless, excruciating pain surged forth from every inch of every limb and bone. He collapsed. He crashed heavily into the blood-soaked soil. After experiencing that extreme shock and deathly silence, the audience of Demon Slayer finally went into a frenzy. Demon Slayer Corps Headquarters. In Kaguya Yubayashiki's garden, all the pillars could no longer maintain their former tranquility. Good! A thunderous shout rang out in the courtyard. Flame Pillar Kyojuro Rengoku suddenly stood up from his seat, his fists clenched, and his golden red eyes burned with a flame even more intense than the sun god's fire in the picture. What a fine young man! He burst into laughter, his voice booming with heartfelt admiration and excitement. Truly incredible! To slay the 12 demon moons with the body of a mere mortal. The successor of the breath of the sun. My heart is burning with passion. Sound Pillar Yusui Tianyuan leaned against a pillar, arms crossed, a gorgeous smile curving his lips. He nodded and said in a judging tone. Although covered in blood and in a disheveled state, it was still a glorious victory. And at this very moment, the other side of the world. In that twisted, bizarre, and infinite city that defied all the laws of physics. The expression on Muzan Kibutsuji's face froze. It was a mixture of shock, fear, and extreme anger at being offended. What did he see? A ghost whose blood flows through his veins, actually used blood demon arts to protect humanity. This is betrayal. It is the most thorough and fundamental betrayal of him, the progenitor. What he found even more intolerable, what made every cell in his body scream with fear, was the last slash the boy made. That flame. That breathing technique. That face that had terrified him for 1,000 years, imprinted in the deepest part of his soul, and could never be erased. Yoriichi Tsujikuni. That man's breath of the sun has reappeared in this world. Kill them. Kibutsuji Muzan's lips opened and closed silently. That handsome, almost otherworldly face began to contort due to extreme emotions. The veins on his forehead and neck throbbed wildly, winding like snakes. They must be killed. Just as his murderous intent, ignited by fear, was about to erupt completely. The image on the screen suddenly changed. Buzz. It was as if space itself had been torn apart. The audience's gaze was instantly drawn from the bright moonlit Spider Mountain into an endless darkness and distortion. Infinite City. The scene shifts to Muzan Kibutsuji. His cruel, paranoid, and tyrannical nature was completely exposed and laid bare before all the viewers in the Myriad Realms at this moment. Because of his fear of sun breathing, he directed all his anger at the other lower moon demons kneeling before him. Why? His voice was soft, yet it carried a chilling quality that could freeze one's soul. You guys are that weak. He paced slowly, his leather shoes clicking on the wooden floor, each step striking the hearts of the lower moon demons. Tired, but only in the 5th month of the lunar calendar. And you, the remaining lower moons, why is none of you of any use? The ghost kneeling below trembled like a leaf. They dared not look up, dared not defend themselves, and dared not even breathe. That absolute suppression, originating from the deepest part of their bloodline, made them not even have the courage to move a finger. No. No, Lord Muzan. One of the lower-level demons could no longer withstand the pressure of the deathly silence and spoke in a trembling voice. Please give us another chance. We will definitely. He didn't finish his sentence. Pfft. A gigantic maw, covered in sharp teeth, appeared out of nowhere from the ground and instantly swallowed him whole. Before he could even scream, a lower moon demon vanished. The sounds of flesh and blood being chewed and absorbed echoed clearly in the deathly silent, infinite city. Muzan's face remained completely expressionless. It was as if he had only crushed an insect. His anger, fueled by fear, needed an outlet. And these weak lower crescent moons are the best sacrifices. Amidst the fear and pleas for mercy of those lower moon demons, Muzan ruthlessly slaughtered and absorbed them one by one. There is no reason. Simply because he wanted to. It's just because he's in a bad mood. Simply because they are too weak. This scene instantly caused the audience across the Myriad Realms to lose all respect for this lofty progenitor of demons. That was not a judgment by the strong against the weak. That's pure cowardice, using the slaughter of his own subordinates to cover up his inner fear. One Piece World. On the Going Merry. Luffy's fists were clenched so tightly they cracked, and his face was frighteningly dark in the shadow of his straw hat. That guy. He slammed his fist on the railing of the ship's side, making a loud bang. To attack one's own comrade. Unforgivable. The Naruto world. A Megakure village, atop the tallest iron tower. Pain watched the carnage unfolding on the screen of light with indifference, his eyes remaining calm and undisturbed. Violence inflicted on subordinates out of personal fear. He made his assessment coldly. This is the lowest form of rule. A true god should bring order, not spread fear. Spells returned to the world. Suddenly, a mouth appeared on Yuji Itadori's cheek. Ryomen Sukuna let out a sneer of pleasure and contempt. Scraps. His voice was filled with undisguised contempt. Whether it's this Muzan or these weak demons kneeling on the ground begging for mercy, they're all trash. He didn't care about Muzan's cruelty. He only despised the weakness that these beings represented. He felt disgusted by the weakness of both the perpetrator and the victim. The video played on the light screen continues. The brutal massacre continues. This bloody and brutal scene instantly placed the name Muzan Kibutsuji on the kill list of countless powerful beings across the Myriad Realms. Chapter 10. Just when all the worlds thought the top 10 list would end with Muzan's disgusting and brutal massacre, the scene on the screen suddenly changed without warning. Buzz. It was as if an invisible hand had forcibly changed the channel. The dark, oppressive, bloody, and wailing Infinite City vanished in an instant. Instead, there was that familiar, eerie Spider Mountain. Not a Spider Mountain. Time on the light screen was subtly shifted, rewinding slightly. The image captured the most thrilling moment. Tanjiro Kamato's Nichiren blade, imbued with his entire life and will, transformed into a blazing fire dragon, severing the head of lower rank 5 Rui. However, it was just a false victory. Exhausted, Tanjiro collapsed to the ground, having exhausted even the strength to stand up. However, the severed head did not disappear. One after another, strong spider silks extended from the severed neck, precisely connecting with the flying head, and were pulling it back to the body at a speed visible to the naked eye. It's over. The sound was weary, tinged with the resentment and madness of someone who had survived a catastrophe. I'll use my blood demon art to cut you and your sister into pieces. Countless threads tightened, transforming into a deadly net, about to engulf the immobilized Tanjiro. Despair descended once more. At this critical moment, a figure descended silently from the sky without any warning. His landing was so light that it made no sound, as if a feather had fallen. It landed steadily in front of Tanjiro, completely protecting the boy's frail body behind it. The newcomer was wearing a peculiar haori, feathered kimono. The left half is a calm crimson, while the right half features intricate geometric patterns. Two completely different styles were forcibly spliced together, yet they appeared incredibly harmonious on him. He held a dark blue Nichiren blade with 4 characters engraved on its blade, Demon Slayer. Behind him, the huge character, Destroy, further highlights his identity, which is completely different from that of ordinary team members. His expression was as cold as a glacier that has never melted. Water column, Tomioka Jiu. On the screen, golden lettering identified the man. He didn't even glance at the bloodied and battered youth behind him, but calmly stared at the enemy before him with his unwavering blue eyes. The 5th of the lower moon, tired. The movements of the tired person froze for a moment because of the appearance of this uninvited guest. Stunned. Then came an even more hysterical frenzy. Another one. Another one coming to die. He let out a sharp roar, transferring all his hatred for Tanjiro onto this suddenly appearing man. Blood demon art, circular line revolving. He unleashed all the remaining strength he had without reservation. Those threads, harder than steel, were transformed under his control into a massive, crimson rain of silk threads, raining down on Gyuto Myoka from all directions with no blind spots. Each thread is enough to cut through a boulder. This endless drizzle is enough to level a small hill. However, Gyuto Myoka's expression remained unchanged in the face of this devastating attack. He simply raised the Nichiren blade in his hand calmly. There was no retreat. There was no dodge. They didn't even move their feet an inch. He simply stood there and released his breathing technique. A type that was never seen before, and that even Tanjiro had never heard of before, that was uniquely his own. Water breathing, 11th form, Nagi. The next moment, under the incredible gaze of countless powerful beings across the Myriad Realms, a miracle occurred. Or rather, it was a sight even more incredible than a miracle. The countless, supposedly indestructible blood-red threads, flying everywhere, came within a meter of Gyuto Myoka the instant. It was not blocked. It was not bounced off. Instead, everything vanished into nothingness. Yes, nothingness. One by one, the sharp threads shattered, disintegrated, and vanished into the air. It was as if the space where Gyuto Myoka stood was an absolute calm zone. A silent, absolutely defensive domain. Any attack that enters this domain will be completely erased from existence. All attacks were nullified. This scene caused the minds of countless powerful figures from around the world to momentarily freeze. One Piece World. Worldwide Totland. Charlotte Katakuri unleashed her observation haki, which allowed her to foresee the near future, to its fullest extent at this moment. His pupils suddenly contracted. In the future he foresaw, the outcome was clear: all the threads were cut. But he couldn't understand the process. His observation haki couldn't detect the trajectory of the blade at all. It's not dodging, nor is it blocking. Katakuri's voice carried a hint of shock for the first time. Was it completely severed? At the very moment before the attack touched his body? That was too fast. It was so fast that even his ability to foresee the future couldn't explain its underlying principles. The world of Bleach. Seiridai, the barracks of the 6th Division. Kukaki Byakuya's usually expressionless face showed a slight sidelong glance. As the captain of the Godai 13, he saw through the essence of this move at a glance. Has defense been elevated to an absolute domain? His fingers tapped lightly on the armrest. That's interesting. It does have some of the prototype of Senbonzakura Kage Yoshi. That was not a simple slash, but rather an extreme increase in the speed and density of the slash, thereby creating an inviolable absolute space around the person. The images on the light screen are still flowing. Within that absolute Nagi domain, after shattering all attacks, Gyuto Myoka finally moved. No further words were spoken. There was no declaration of victory. He simply flashed by. A blue trail of water flashed by in the dark forest. Clean. Neat. He slashed down with a single stroke. Pfft. The head of Rui, the 5th of the lower moons, flies high into the air once again. This time, the expression on his face was no longer one of resentment and madness, but rather one of utter and incomprehensible astonishment. He could sense it. This time, the thread connecting his body and head was completely severed at its root. A real, irreversible death. This scene gave all the worlds a completely new and terrifying understanding of the Demon Slayer core pillars class, one that was enough to overturn all previous knowledge. Tanjiro Kamado and Nezuko, siblings, burned their lives, pushed their limits, and even risked everything to barely see a glimmer of hope, but ultimately fell into the desperate situation of the lower moon 5. In front of this man named Pillar. But he couldn't even withstand a single move. From the moment she appeared to the moment she left, it was only the time it took to breathe. What a stark difference! This is no longer a simple matter of strength or weakness, but a crushing defeat on a level of life. Inside Lin Yu's observatory, Lin Yu subconsciously wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, his Adam's apple bobbing. He stared at the man in the light screen, who had sheathed his sword and whose expression remained indifferent, and his heart began to pound uncontrollably. This. His voice was a little hoarse. This is only 10th place. That, the 9th place. Chapter 11. Inside Lin Yu's observatory. His heart pounded uncontrollably, and cold sweat trickled down his face. Lin Yu looked at the man on the screen who had sheathed his sword and whose expression remained as cold as an ancient glacier. His Adam's apple bobbed, and he made a dry sound. This is only 10th place. What kind of terrifying existence must the 9th-ranked person be? His question seemed to have triggered some kind of switch in the dark. The images continued on the light screen. On the scorched earth of Nadagumo Mountain, the smoke of battle had not yet completely dissipated. Gyutomyoka shielded the heavily injured Tanjiro behind him, and the other half of his uniquely patchwork-style Haori was unfolded to cover the demon named Nezuko. His stance formed an insurmountable barrier. Just then, a soft female voice came through, melodious yet carrying in lingering chill. Breaking team rules and protecting the devil. Mr. Tomioka, why did you do this? The moment the words left his mouth, a figure silently descended. Her toes touched the ground, so lightly that not a speck of dust was stirred up. She was draped in a Haori as radiant as butterfly wings, and her face wore an eternally gentle smile. However, deep within those beautiful purple eyes lay a chilling coldness even greater than the Siberian frigid current. And an almost overflowing anger. Shinobu Koko, the insect Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps. Butterfly. Yoshiyuki Tomioka frowned even more deeply and uttered two simple words. I did not cover it up. They are siblings, but they are different. His voice was as calm as ever, yet it carried an undeniable firmness. Oh! Shinobu's smile widened, making her appear even sweeter. However, the killing intent emanating from her body also intensified to a completely new level. What's different? Her voice remained soft, each word as fleeting as a feather, yet sharp as a needle. My sister was killed by a ghost. Before she died, she said that ghosts are pathetic creatures, but I can't agree with that. Former flower pillar, can a butterfly. This name is an indelible mark etched into her soul, the root of all her anger and actions. That hatred had long been ingrained in her blood. Her gaze passed over Gyutomyoka and landed on Nezuko behind him. Beneath that gentle smile lay undisguised disgust. I cannot tolerate anyone who protects ghosts. Before she could finish speaking, she had already vanished. That speed was so fast that, in the eyes of countless powerful beings across the Myriad Realms, it left only a blurry purple afterimage. A deadly trajectory. Insect breathing, bee-fang dance, true dance. Her slender blade traced a strange zigzag line in the air, its tip coated with wisteria poison powerful enough to instantly kill evil spirits, shimmering with an eerie light. The goal is to pierce Nezuko's throat. Clang! A crisp, sharp impact rang out. Gyutomyoka didn't even draw his sword. He simply turned to the side and used the scabbard in his hand to precisely parry the fatal blow. The blade tip collided with the scabbard, and a spark flashed and disappeared. Water breathing, fourth form, strike tide. He was just stopping it. He didn't want to make enemies of his colleagues. Mr. Tomioka. Shinobu Koko performed a graceful somersault in midair and landed steadily, a crack finally appearing on her gentle smiling face. This is blatant disobedience. This scene caused an uproar throughout the myriad worlds that had been immersed in Gyuto Tomioka's immense power. A new storm is brewing in countless worlds. Naruto World. Inside the Hokage's office. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, with his pipe dangling from his lips, watched the conflict on the screen and sighed deeply. The swirling smoke obscured his eyes, which were etched with the marks of time. Sigh, it's happening again. The chain of hatred. Is this world not immune either? He's seen too much. Once the seeds of hatred are sown between villages, between families, and even between companions, they will grow wildly until they devour everything. Kakashi, standing beside him, also had a serious expression on his face, even his signature deadpan eyes. His gaze fell on Gyuto Tomioka's resolute back. He thought of Obito. I thought of Lin. I recalled those past events where people were bound by cold, hard rules, ultimately leading to irreversible tragedies. Breaking the rules for the sake of comrades. He whispered the creed that would completely change his life. One Piece World. Fishman Island. Jinbe, the Knight of the Sea, sat upright with an extremely serious expression. Protecting the ghost is indeed a violation of their organization's rules. From the organization's perspective, the butterfly woman's actions are justifiable. His voice was deep and powerful. But his tone suddenly shifted, now tinged with obvious respect. That girl called Ghost, she just risked her life to protect that human boy. I saw it with my own eyes. That's right. On the Going Merry, Monkey D. Luffy was vigorously waving his fist and nodding loudly. She was a good ghost. Why did that butterfly woman kill her? His logic is simple and pure. A person who protects their companions is a good person. Jujutsu Kaisen World. Within the scope of higher vocational colleges. Xiaoyuja watched this scene on the screen and let out a pleasant, barely suppressed chuckle. Ha, he. He spread his hands to his close friend beside him, the movement elegant, but his eyes were full of mockery. See, woo. That's how monkeys are. Those who are not of our kind will surely have different hearts. His gaze carried a hint of condescending pity, as if he were observing a group of pathetic creatures. They can't even tolerate a ghost that protected humanity and retained its own sanity. They only think with those pathetic rules and deep-seated hatred. It's really too weak. This time, Gojo Satoru did not immediately refute his close friend's extreme remarks. He simply rested his chin on his hand, and his 6 eyes behind the black sunglasses seemed to penetrate the image on the screen of light, seeing something deeper. Yet, he spoke casually, his voice as nonchalant as ever. But that water column named Gyuto Tomioka, wasn't he also protecting her with his actions? A playful smile curved at the corners of Gojo Satoru's lips. Sometimes, one person's will is much more interesting than the rules of a group. Chapter 12. Inside Lin Yu's observatory. His heart pounded uncontrollably, and cold sweat trickled down his face. Lin Yu looked at the man on the screen who had sheathed his sword and whose expression remained as cold as an ancient glacier. His Adam's apple bobbed, and he made a dry sound. This is only 10th place. What kind of terrifying existence must the 9th-ranked person be? His question seemed to have triggered some kind of switch in the dark. The images continued on the light screen. On the scorched earth of Nadagumo Mountain, the smoke of battle had not yet completely dissipated. Gyuto Tomioka shielded the heavily injured Tanjiro behind him, and the other half of his uniquely patchwork-style Haori was unfolded to cover the demon named Nezuko. His stance formed an insurmountable barrier. Just then, a soft female voice came through, melodious yet carrying in lingering chill. Breaking team rules and protecting the devil. Mr. Tomioka, why did you do this? The moment the words left his mouth, a figure silently descended. Her toes touched the ground, so lightly that not a speck of dust was stirred up. She was draped in a Haori as radiant as butterfly wings, and her face wore an eternally gentle smile. However, deep within those beautiful purple eyes lay a chilling coldness even greater than the Siberian frigid current. And an almost overflowing anger. Shinobu Koko, the insect Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps. Butterfly. Yoshiyuki Tomioka frowned even more deeply and uttered two simple words. I did not cover it up. They are siblings, but they are different. His voice was as calm as ever, yet it carried an undeniable firmness. Oh! Shinobu's smile widened, making her appear even sweeter. However, the killing intent emanating from her body also intensified to a completely new level. What's different? Her voice remained soft, each word as fleeting as a feather, yet sharp as a needle. My sister was killed by a ghost. Before she died, she said that ghosts are pathetic creatures, but I can't agree with that. Former flower pillar, can a butterfly. This name is an indelible mark etched into her soul, the root of all her anger and actions. That hatred had long been ingrained in her blood. Her gaze passed over Jiu Tomioka and landed on Nezuko behind him. Beneath that gentle smile lay undisguised disgust. I cannot tolerate anyone who protects ghosts. Before she could finish speaking, she had already vanished. That speed was so fast that, in the eyes of countless powerful beings across the Myriad Realms, it left only a blurry purple afterimage. A deadly trajectory. Insect breathing, bee-fang dance, true dance. Her slender blade traced a strange zigzag line in the air, its tip coated with wisteria poison powerful enough to instantly kill evil spirits, shimmering with an eerie light. The goal is to pierce Nezuko's throat. Clang! A crisp, sharp impact rang out. Jiu Tomioka didn't even draw his sword. He simply turned to the side and used the scabbard in his hand to precisely parry the fatal blow. The blade tip collided with the scabbard, and a spark flashed and disappeared. Water breathing, fourth form, strike tide. He was just stopping it. He didn't want to make enemies of his colleagues. Mr. Tomioka. Shinobu Koko performed a graceful somersault in midair and landed steadily, a crack finally appearing on her gentle smiling face. This is blatant disobedience. This scene caused an uproar throughout the myriad worlds that had been immersed in Jiu Tomioka's immense power. A new storm is brewing in countless worlds. Naruto World. Inside the Hokage's office. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, with his pipe dangling from his lips, watched the conflict on the screen and sighed deeply. The swirling smoke obscured his eyes, which were etched with the marks of time. Sigh, it's happening again. The chain of hatred. Is this world not immune either? He's seen too much. Once the seeds of hatred are sown between villages, between families, and even between companions, they will grow wildly until they devour everything. Kakashi, standing beside him, also had a serious expression on his face, even his signature deadpan eyes. His gaze fell on Jiu Tomioka's resolute back. He thought of Obito. I thought of Lin. I recalled those past events where people were bound by cold, hard rules, ultimately leading to irreversible tragedies. Breaking the rules for the sake of comrades. He whispered the creed that would completely change his life. One Piece World. Fishman Island. Jinbe, the Knight of the Sea, sat upright with an extremely serious expression. Protecting the ghost is indeed a violation of their organization's rules. From the organization's perspective, the butterfly woman's actions are justifiable. His voice was deep and powerful. But his tone suddenly shifted, now tinged with obvious respect. That girl called Ghost, she just risked her life to protect that human boy. I saw it with my own eyes. That's right. On the Going Merry, Monkey D. Luffy was vigorously waving his fist and nodding loudly. She was a good ghost. Why did that butterfly woman kill her? His logic is simple and pure. A person who protects their companions is a good person. Jujutsu Kaisen World. Within the scope of higher vocational colleges. Xiaoyuja watched this scene on the screen and let out a pleasant, barely suppressed chuckle. Ha! He. He spread his hands to his close friend beside him, the movement elegant, but his eyes were full of mockery. See, Wu. That's how monkeys are. Those who are not of our kind will surely have different hearts. His gaze carried a hint of condescending pity, as if he were observing a group of pathetic creatures. They can't even tolerate a ghost that protected humanity and retained its own sanity. They only think with those pathetic rules and deep-seated hatred. It's really too weak. This time, Gojo Satoru did not immediately refute his close friend's extreme remarks. He simply rested his chin on his hand, and his 6 eyes behind the black sunglasses seemed to penetrate the image on the screen of light, seeing something deeper. Yet, he spoke casually, his voice as nonchalant as ever. But that water column named Gyutomyoka, wasn't he also protecting her with his actions? A playful smile curved at the corners of Gojo Satoru's lips. Sometimes, one person's will is much more interesting than the rules of a group. Chapter 13. Kagura Yubayashiki's words were like invisible hammers, stirring up towering waves in the hearts of all the powerful beings in the Myriad Realms. That guarantee, wagered on life itself, that commitment to completely staking one's own dignity and that of the organization's highest leader on 2 low-ranking team members, its weight was enough to crush any rational soul. Silence. After the deathly silence came an uncontrollable uproar and storm. However, the light screen did not give them much time to process this shock. Amidst the astonished, moved, and even bewildered gazes of everyone, the light reflecting on the Demon Slayer Corps' courtyard began to slowly recede and dim. Instead, there was only a deep, dark blackness. Immediately afterwards, streaks of golden light converged in the darkness, eventually coalescing into lines of solemn and dignified text. As the words appeared, a deep, melodious chant, seemingly traversing through time, resonated deep within the souls of all the audience members. The voice did not belong to any known life form, yet it carried a majestic and ancient aura that seemed to look down upon eternity. A review of the 10 greatest godlike battles across the Myriad Realms. The title alone caused the pupils of countless powerful figures from around the world to suddenly contract. Top 10, a world-shaking battle of gods, the bonds of bloodlines. When people saw the top 10 ranking, many showed expressions of "I knew it." Although the battle was moving, in terms of power level, it certainly didn't reach the true peak. But the words that appeared next captivated them once again. Reason for inclusion. The golden lettering burned on the light screen. This may not be the most powerful battle, but it embodies the purest will. The scene flashed by Tanjiro carrying Nezuko on his back through the snow, his unwavering spirit amidst despair piercing the eyes of countless viewers. With a mortal body, he comprehended a fragment of the breath of the sun and slew a powerful enemy ranked lower moon. The scene changes, and flames soar into the sky. Tanjiro's figure overlapped with his father's Kagura dance from his memory, and the stunning Hinokami Kagura waltz once again shocked everyone's visual senses. That determination to transcend limits and burn with life moved countless powerful individuals who made a living through combat. In the body of a demon, she upholds the bond between siblings, breaks free from the curse of their bloodline, and protects her human brother. The scene then changes. Nezuko's petite body stood in front of Tanjiro, using her own flesh and blood to block the potentially deadly spider silk. Under the lure of Shinazugawa Sanemi's blood, she trembled violently, her veins bulging, yet she still abruptly turned her head away. That struggle, that resistance, that protection that comes from the depths of the soul. Tanjiro and Nezuko, they exemplified the meaning of bond with their lives and souls. That unbreakable kinship was enough to shake the world and reverse fate. The grand narration ended. The image on the light screen finally froze. The image was frozen on that mountain, the devastated, scorched earth. The severely injured boy was covered in blood and could barely stand, but his clear, ruby-like eyes burned with an inextinguishable flame of anger. The flame seemed to burn away all the sins and evils in the world. He faced the empty space ahead, or perhaps the myriad worlds beyond the light screen, and with his last ounce of strength, he made a vow that cost him his very soul. The voice was hoarse and broken, yet incredibly firm, piercing through time and space, echoing in every world. I will definitely defeat Muzan Kibutsuji. No matter where you run, I will chase them all the way to the ends of hell. Use my knife to cut off your head. As the vow was made, the camera suddenly zoomed in. The close-up shot focused on the pair of sun-shaped earrings that were constantly swaying behind his ears. At that moment, the ancient pattern seemed to transform into an ever-shining sun, deeply imprinting that resolute vow into the very soul of every viewer. Demon Slayer World. Infinite City. Crack. A piercing cracking sound shattered the deathly silence of this otherworldly space. Kibutsuji Muzan, the progenitor of demons who has lived for 1,000 years and regards all things as straw dogs, is trembling violently and uncontrollably. It wasn't because of excitement. It's anger. It's fear. It was the ultimate humiliation of being predicted to die in front of all the heavens and the myriad worlds, by an ant in his eyes that he could crush with a flick of his wrist. The sophisticated glass instruments and vessels around him, filled with all sorts of strange liquids, shattered and crumbled one after another under the impact of his rampant ghostly aura. Humiliation. This is an unprecedented humiliation. Tanjiro. He spat out the name through gritted teeth, his voice so chilling it distorted the entire space of the infinite city. Sunwheel earrings. Breathing of the Sunday. Two extreme emotions surged within his scarlet, inhuman vertical pupils. One type is a deep-seated fear that has spanned hundreds of years. Another is the overwhelming rage ignited by this fear, which wants to burn everything to ashes. Naruto World. Konoha Village, Hokage's office. Well said, Tanjiro. Naruto Uzumaki jumped up excitedly, raised his fist, and roared loudly, his azure eyes shining with empathy. This is the oath a real man should make. Keep going. You have to do it. One Piece World. The New World, Moby DK. Gulalalala. Edward Newgate, with his white beard, held a huge wine bowl and let out a hearty, powerful laugh that made the entire giant ship hum. What a spirited brat! He tilted his head back and gulped down a large mouthful of wine, his eyes full of admiration. Based on this awareness alone, I approve of you. Earth Lin Yu's room. Call. Lin Yu looked at the words TOP10 playback ended slowly appearing on the huge projector in front of him, let out a long breath, and slumped back in his gaming chair. He rubbed his slightly sore eyes, then stretched out a big yawn, his bones cracking and popping. After 3 days and 3 nights of editing, we finally finished playing the first video. The effect should be pretty good, right? He muttered to himself, completely unaware that his debut work, created casually by this fledgling newbie content creator, had already stirred up a terrifying and overwhelming wave in the distant Myriad Realms. He only cares about one thing now. Something that was more important to him than world peace or the survival of the universe. He rubbed his hands together, his eyes shining as he stared at a virtual backend interface next to the projector that only he could see. Where is the tipping option? Chapter 14. Although the TOP10 list has come to an end, it has dropped a nuclear bomb in all the worlds, enough to ignite an era. The discussion has only just begun. The aftershocks are sweeping across every world shrouded in light at a speed exceeding that of light. Demon Slayer World. We won, we won. A Demon Slayer core recruit, his face still bearing the innocence of youth, knelt in the mud, letting tears mixed with dirt stream down his cheeks. His Nichiren blade rested on the ground, supporting his trembling body, which was shaking with overwhelming excitement. Did you see that? The lower moon 5, that spider demon, was slain by Tanjiro senpai. Beside him, an older team member with one arm missing gripped the knife handle tightly with his remaining hand, veins bulging on the back of his hand. In his single eye, the burning blade, finally frozen in time on the screen, was reflected, and something long extinguished rekindled in his cloudy eyeball. That Hinokami Kagura. His voice was hoarse, yet it carried a trembling tone of confirmation of history. That must be the legendary sun breathing. My lord mentioned that it's the origin of all breathing techniques, and the strongest breathing technique. This statement is like a drop of boiling oil falling into boiling water. Instantly, in every corner of the Demon Slayer Corps, whether they were seasoned Class A swordsmen or newly recruited Class G members who had just completed the final selection, everyone's emotions were ignited. Hope. This word, which was almost completely erased and forgotten on the night when countless companions were devoured by evil spirits, transformed into a raging fire at this moment, reigniting in the hearts of all team members. They have hope. They have a chance to defeat those arrogant upper moons. They have hope of finally ending that thousand-year nightmare known as Kibutsuji Muzan. Naruto World. A dark, damp underground base. The air was filled with an eerie stench of formaldehyde mixed with the smell of blood. Orochimaru stuck out his long tongue and licked his pale lips. In his golden snake eyes, there was a greedy and curious look, like that of an anatomist discovering a new species. The projection of the light screen cast dappled light and shadow on the petri dish in front of him. Breathing of the Sunday. He murmured softly, his voice carrying a unique, sticky quality. Can the body's functions unleash destructive power beyond chakra simply by breathing through the lungs? This does not conform to the law of conservation of energy, unless it can draw some unknown energy from the outside world. His gaze then shifted to the scene of Nezuko exploding blood. And then there's that blood demon art, near immortal regeneration, burning blood to cause damage, it's practically perfect material. He turned to the bespectacled, calm figure behind him. Pocket. Yes, Lord Orochimaru. Investigate immediately. Orochimaru's snake-like eyes narrowed slightly, and the light within them sent chills down one's spine. Use all the intelligence channels that Sound and Root have in our hands to investigate whether this Demon Slayer world truly exists. He paused for a moment, then a sickly grin spread across his face. I am very interested in their bodies. One Piece World. On Oni Island, amidst the deafening clamor of a banquet. Kaido, his massive body leaning back on the skull throne, grabbed the huge gourd beside him and gulped down a mouthful of strong liquor. The liquor dripped down his chin, soaking the hair on his chest. Belch. A loud burp drowned out all the surrounding noise. Bonds? What a ridiculous thing. Worororo. He let out a thunderous laugh, filled with absolute disdain for Tanjiro's ideals. Only absolute power can dominate everything. Only the weak seek connection with others. He slammed the wine gourd heavily onto the ground, making a dull thud. But then his laughter subsided, and a calculating glint flashed in his eyes, which were somewhat hazy from the alcohol. But he stroked his chin, recalling Muzan's terrifying regeneration speed in the light screen. That guy named Muzan, his regenerative ability is not bad. If my beasts pirates, those gifters, could also possess this ability. Kaido's eyes turned dangerous. Jujutsu Kaisen World. Deep within Hisahito Itadori's consciousness. The deep, ancient voice of Liang Miansunyo rang out, carrying a hint of condescending amusement. Kid, did you see that female ghost's blood? Hey! Yuji Itadori was taken aback. Blood burst, can precisely burn the opponent's blood and demonic arts. Sunyo's voice carried a soft hum, the tone of a top expert commenting on a mediocre work, yet it also carried a hint of interest that could not be completely concealed. Humph, this is interesting. It's quite like some kind of special curse reversal, a targeted output using blood as a medium. It's crude, but the idea is right. And at this moment, the true eye of all the storms. Infinite City. The overwhelming anger sparked by the reappearance of the breath of the sun has been completely overwhelmed by another, more primal and profound emotion. It is fear. It originates from 1,000 years ago, on that rainy night, from the man who drove him to the brink of despair and made him taste death for the first time. Muzan Kibutsuji's body stopped trembling. He simply stood there quietly, but that deathly stillness was more unsettling than any violent act. The air around him was distorted due to the extremely low air pressure. The color drained from that handsome, almost otherworldly face, leaving only a sickly pallor. Nekam. His voice was no longer cold, instead, it became sharp, even carrying a faint, almost imperceptible crack. Zhang. A strange pipa melody echoed throughout the entire alternate dimension. The space twisted, and several figures appeared silently in front of him, kneeling on one knee. Each figure exuded a suffocating sense of oppression that was completely on a different level from the lower moon demons. Doma, Akaza, Kokushibo. His strongest fighting force, the upper moons, is all here. At all costs. Muzan's voice was distorted with fear, his crimson vertical pupils staring intently at the void before him, as if they could pierce through time and space to see the boy wielding the flaming blade. Unleash all the demons. Use every means at your disposal. Find the boy with the sun-shaped earring. Find Tanjiro Kamatu. His voice grew louder and louder, eventually turning into a hysterical scream. The inheritor of the breath of the Sunday. Absolutely. He must not be allowed to live. Bring him back to me. Chapter 15. Lin Yu rubbed his sleepy eyes. A stiff, aching pain shot through the back of his neck. The after effects of years of editing at his desk clung to him like a leech, reminding him of the long hours he had just completed. When he looked at the old, buzzing projector again, he froze. Their movements froze, and their breathing stopped. On the side of the projector, where there used to be just a heat vent, a component that doesn't belong to the machine has appeared out of nowhere. It resembles a forcibly embedded, futuristic energy tank, only the size of a palm, with some indescribable golden liquid flowing beneath its translucent crystalline material. At this moment, the energy bar was flashing with a blinding light. With each pulsation of light, every speck of dust in the room became clearly visible. Countless tiny energy points, invisible to the naked eye, emerged from the void, like fireflies summoned, rushing one after another into the energy tank, making the golden light even more intense and scorching. Immediately afterwards, lines of cold, emotionless text appeared directly on his retina. Received 10,000 energy points from the Naruto world. Received 8,000 energy points from the One Piece world. Received 5,000 energy points from Demon Slayer, Kaguya Yubayashiki. Received 100 energy points from Jujutsu Kaisen Gojo Satoru. Very interesting, hurry up with the next one. This. Lin Yu's Adam's apple bobbed up and down, and the sound he made was extremely dry. A tip? The word exploded in his mind. He stared at the almost overflowing golden energy bar, and then, recalling the names from different worlds, an absurd yet uniquely reasonable guess made his heart pound uncontrollably. He tentatively reached out his hand, which was slightly sweaty from nervousness, slowly toward the energy tank that was radiating high temperature. The instant fingertips touch. Boom! An indescribable, scorching heat, originating from his fingertips, exploded instantly, rushing fiercely along the meridians of his arm to his limbs and bones. Ugh! Lin Yu let out a muffled groan, staggered backward, and slammed his back against the wall. This is not pain.